And good evening, welcome. It's episode 15 of the ProSynth Network live show. It's Sunday the 12th of July 2020. We're all still here. The apocalypse hasn't happened yet. Good evening, gents. How are we all?
Episode 15, it seems like just a week ago it was only episode 14.
I know. It's crazy how those days fly by. Indeed. Chris, how is it over there in California?
Too hot.
Yes, I heard.
Too hot, too busy. Hurt my back.
Oh, yeah.
Pulling weeds. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get older.
I thought when you said you'd hurt your back, I had visions of you lifting an amp, something, or doing, and you were just pulling weeds. How?
Yeah, I know. It's like I would have rather gone out in glory, like trying to move the Moog 1. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I put my back out with the Moog 1. We get that. Weeds, really? Well. Anyway, hope you're feeling a little better. I was talking to some colleagues in California and Texas the other day, and yeah, crazy hot. Texas is like 105 or something like that at the moment, which is just crazy. And then one of my colleagues from Dubai piped up and says, 105, that's spring-like, that is. Because it's 140, 150 over there. It's just I've been to Dubai in the summer, and it's an awful, awful place. And that's when they have Ramadan a lot of the time, at the hottest time of the year. So you've got all of these Dubai people who are fasting in the hottest day. I mean, how awful is that? It's just terrible.
oh man,
Bad planning that. Anyway, up north to Ben. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I've not had a very musical week. But it's been a week of learning. I've been on a marketing course.
Ooh.
That was like so boring I fell asleep.
Marketing generally is, yeah.
And I've been learning a little bit of Francais as well.
Ooh la la, get you.
but musically, I've not had a very eventful week. Really,
No.
I'm a bit disappointed with myself.
Oh well, it's time to make up for it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I've been learning this thing, or trying to, the Korg Z1. Got my manual.
Yes.
The one thing I because I got that along with the CS6X, so I've got both the manuals. And the one thing I really did notice is that Yamaha manuals are actually, certainly this one, is actually quite good. It kind of takes you through step by step, whereas these Korg ones, I mean, it's just like, here's what everything does, but it doesn't kind of give you examples of what you want to do, and it's just, it's a bit hard work. But I managed to load banks and move banks from the internal memory to the RAM card, and so now I've got loads of sounds, and I started digging in, and so I'm just going to learn by dissecting and stuff. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Roland manuals sort of say you have chorus 1 and 2. Okay.
That's it.
What do they do? What are they different? They have different delay times? Are they LFO, different wave shape? What? No, you have chorus 1 and 2.
Yeah. One is greater than the other. That's it. What else do you need to know? Best manuals ever made. I think we've had this discussion, but the best manuals ever written were Akai's S-series sampler manuals that were written by Steve Howell, who, when you read them, you can read the tongue in his cheek as he's explaining some of this stuff to you, and he's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant writing. It's well worth downloading an Akai manual, even if you don't have one, just to read it, because it's very informative. So there you go.
I've always really appreciated that when they will put those humorous bits in there, and even working on a lot of gear, we were just talking about that. Like, there'll be some Easter eggs on circuit boards, like I'll be fixing something and there'll be a little message in there. Yeah,
I love stuff like that. I think it's really cool. Anyway, so it's kind of been a quietish week. We've got a handful of topics that we can go through, and we've got an opinion-led discussion that we've got lined up, which we've been meaning to do for a few weeks, so we're going to do that today. Let's just nip over to the chat room and say hello to the likes of Wagyu and Richard and Sasquatch and Imperfect and anyone else. Finn there, hello. Assio Head, hi Bert, how you doing? If you're not chatting in the chat room and you're watching, why not? It's how we can keep in touch with you. If you have any questions for us, just at us, do the at ProSynth Network or at Red Electro for Ben. Cryss, are you in there as well? Just under?
Yeah, Synthient Sound.
Yep, so at Synthient Sound. And just so, because it just makes it easy, because at the moment, we're all looking at screens and trying to manage the show. If we see our names pop up, then we're drawn to that and we can answer your question and it won't go missed at all. So, shall we crack on with some topics? Oh, guys, it does seem every week we mention this lot. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but hey, Spitfire Audio have something new. We won't spend too long on this because I haven't actually used this yet. I'm hoping to get hold of a copy, but it's the new plugin, orchestral plugin from Spitfire Audio called Symphonic Motions. I have one of those every morning, a symphonic motion. There's lots of wailing and stuff, but this is an interesting. I'm not quite sure what the relevance of a paint-soaked violin is. Maybe somebody can explain that to me. I'm not, it looks nice, I suppose, but Symphonic Motions is all about stuff like this, which is rhythmic passages. So it's kind of like dynamic rhythmic passages that can just be very easily constructed using their plugin, their bespoke plugin, designed by composers for composers. It sounds nice, but is this something that we could use? I mean, we're all just kind of getting used to doing orchestral scores with BBC Symphony Orchestra. Anybody got any opinions on this one? I think it's 140. It's usually 199. It's down to 149 as a launch price, which makes it pretty affordable. What are your thoughts? Who wants to go first on this one?
I like it. I think it sounds good. I think it's getting to a point where you've got all these things. You've got to imagine like what it would be like composing like soundtracks and stuff. It just makes the job a lot easier, doesn't it? You've got these articulations, and I remember trying ages and ages to make something orchestral sound realistic on a JB 1080.
Yeah.
That is really, really hard to do. And now we can just I was trying to program these glissando runs and everything. And there's more and more coming out now that it's done for you, which to a composer, it's done for them, isn't it? They don't have to emulate the sound. They just ask the players to do it. I think
it's an interesting, if you look at the interface, it's this, custom Spitfire interface with the two sliders and the dial that can be assigned to different things, but underneath on this one you've got the different types of articulation, so ostinato, col legno, sul-tasto, consort, and the timing intervals, and then the different parts that you want to have played. And I guess these coloured keys correspond with the notes you want to play in the particular places, and you've got this randomized function, which is interesting. It just seems like a very useful tool for rapid development of kind of rhythmic orchestral segments and pieces. So and anything that makes the job easier is got to be good, I suppose. From a professional's perspective, I guess it's just it's rapid construction of something that they can take to a real orchestra and say, I want it to sound like this. What do you think, Cryss?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've enjoyed the BBC Orchestra so far, and probably still need to spend quite a bit more time with it before I start checking this one out. But what I like about it is that they're really working on having the human feel in all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, the music that I grew up, really getting into, a lot of late 60s and 70s rock, mainly all the British guys that listen to the old American blues guys. Mm-hmm. And so with that stuff, it was all about the feel. And I mean, to the extreme, when the first time that I saw any stuff from Led Zeppelin live, which a friend had got a hold of a copy of the song Remains the Same. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was horrified when I watched it because it was so sloppy. I mean, to the, just way out there. But when you listen to it on the albums and they're maybe not quite as high or whatever, just having that human feel. And even if you listen to a band that's much tighter, like Rush or something, like there's still a humanity about it. So when working at home, the hard thing is to get, well, if I'm using sequencers or if I'm using these sample libraries, I want it to have a human feel to it. All this rebowing stuff that this this plugin has, I think really goes a long way towards that. And especially, I mean, it's one thing if you got a whole giant orchestra of sound going on, but if, say, you're using, maybe you're writing a song with acoustic guitar, and you got a single cello going in it, it's really going to stand out, those nuances, the round robins, and how it's being bowed and all that, So this is where I think that probably where they're really trying to focus on their technology and getting it to be indistinguishable from a human player, if possible.
Yeah, it's where we got these specifications. So London's finest players: 22 violins, 12 cellos, 40 articulations, 7 playing techniques, 4 different rhythmic patterns, 6 additional overlay techniques for accents and blending. Recorded in situ using priceless valve and ribbon mics and Neve Montserrat preamps into a Neve 88R desk, recorded digitally at 96 via Studer tape. 3 essential and diverse mic positions, close tree and ambient, and 3 curated mixes, all recorded at Air Studios Hall. And that's what's included, guys. It's a pretty comprehensive package, and as Asio had said in the chat room, again, the pricing is pretty reasonable. When you think about what you're getting, the quality and the support, and that you're kind of buying into an ecosystem and a community, I think, as well. I think that's got a lot to do with it. But yeah, it's say 40% at the moment until August 2nd, so you've got just under 3 weeks, I think, or just over 3 weeks to give that a go. Spitfire Symphonic Motions, interesting. Conversely, we've also got something new this week that is also symphonic, which is Symphonic AI from the guys at Sample Logic. And I was hoping to have had a go with this before we came on air, but unfortunately on this particular library it is only for the full version of Contact, which is slightly disappointing because I don't have the full version of Contact. And I'm actually going to put this out there into the room, shall we say. If anybody has got a completely legitimate way of getting the full version of Contact for as cheap as possible, please let me know, because I can't really afford to buy it now. I can get a cross grade, but that's about it. But Symphonic AI is let's play a clip. Let's bring this up. So it sounds very nice. How does it work? Well, I'd love to tell you, because I was hoping to have had a go. But if it's anything like the other stuff that they've done, which I've got Cinematics and Morphestra. I've got a couple of their things, and it's all heavily reliant on Contact scripting. To provide again kind of building blocks, ways of if you play the notes and it kind of thinks about how you want to play it, and you can set things up so I want this to be a particular way. And if you look at the interface, you choose your presets. You can choose whatever part of the orchestra you want, and then there's step sequencers and there's effects and there's lots of kind of passages and these kind of rhythmic sections that you can start building up. I know that sample logic are very big in the scoring world, because it is one of those tools that you can rapidly bring stuff up and get the creative juices flowing, so to speak. So I'd like to say more, because I'd like to have tried it, but I can't at the moment. I've got the library. I downloaded it, and it was only after I downloaded it that I thought, oh, this doesn't open in the Contact Free player. So tough titties. Thoughts on this one, Cryss?
I just not having Contact. Not even I don't even think I have the free player, so it's a little bit outside of my interest at this point. Some of those things that you were saying about having it easy to use and easy to get kind of into it, that's nice. At this point it's a little bit hard, because I feel like the amount of things that I need to learn, like as I keep grabbing gear and making a midlife instrument addition to my music is been challenging that way. I like techie things, and so as I'm thinking, like, do I want to learn another system? Like, I'm just not there. But this, how they use this AI stuff is going to become, I think, a much bigger thing in the coming years. Mm-hmm. And there was a movie with Joaquin Phoenix, I believe, called Joaquin. Yeah. Man, I can never remember. It's either called She or Her. I don't remember. But the whole movie is about this kind of lonely guy who has a relationship in the near future with his basically Siri device, on his phone, this artificial intelligence. And the thing about the movie that was really interesting to me was the look at technology, because it was almost completely erased out of the movie. Like, in the near future, you don't see any technology at all. It's so integrated into your life that the only thing that you see is this little phone thing that he pulls out of his pocket. And so I think even within music, as computers and phones have gotten so much easier, so much so that even my parents can use it now, that we'll see some of this come to fruition in the music world, maybe a little bit behind everything else. But when it can get to the point of, I don't have to learn so much to get sound out of this and to become proficient at this, maybe it'll make people a little bit lazier, and that might be a danger. But at the same time, some of the things that I don't really want to have to be an expert at to use, I could have that on the side.
Yeah. I think there's so many content creators nowadays in all forms of media that, if you take Ben, for example, I'm going to come to you in just a moment, but, when Ben's scoring 5-10 minute short films, it's now so much easier for someone to compose a score that sounds as good as the big guys rapidly and easily with you're going to have some kind of musical theory knowledge or education or some some kind of understanding of it. But these do they do the heavy lifting, as it says in the description here. It combines all the sounds and gives you kind of performance techniques and shortcuts to some kind of thing. I like it. I don't like I'm always wary of cheating. I don't know, Ben, would you consider yourself cheating if you were to use something like this to score a short film?
Yeah, but I'd still do it.
I have no shame.
I think anything to get where you want to get is okay. It's all about creating the end result. Yeah. And if you've got to sample something to get to that end result, you're still getting there.
Yeah.
So I'm up for it. The only concern that I've got really is that if everybody's using these same things, are we going to get into like a stagnant kind of period of music where everything just sounds the same?
Well, aren't we there already somehow?
Maybe, yeah.
Every movie trailer has the same kind of there's fashion, isn't there? There are styles that are currently fashionable that everybody's doing, and you can even buy plugins that do those specific things, like the the big kind of sub horn, that kind of thing. There's plugins that do just that. There are plugins that do the big drum stuff. So everybody's kind of like copying everybody else, and I guess that's always gone on. But we can all do it, a lot more easy now. Whereas before it was, say when John Williams was composing scores in the late 70s, early 80s, the only people that could copy him were other, well-known composers, because they had the ability to do that. And they did copy him, I mean, you listen to some of the scores from that time, they did copy. Nowadays, we just spend $150, $200, and we can all do what Hans Zimmer does to a degree, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it always leaves room for somebody else to come in and take a left turn, because I mean, you think about the Beatles do their thing in the early '60s, and I mean by the mid '60s they're at the point they're like, we're leaving that behind and we're going in a different direction, and they're getting into Sgt. Pepper and everything. But the mainstream is still in that kind of 60s Britpop sound, and all of a sudden you have Jimi Hendrix come on the scene in '67. And like they have no idea what's going on with this. Like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah.
And the sound and the music and the performance of it. And so I think that it would be in the same way that we will get tired of stagnancy, but and no matter what tools you use, it still takes a good musician.
Yeah.
I think with some of these products and these like sample libraries, what the good part about it is that it gives people who cannot afford to hire an orchestra like John Williams the ability to have the same amount of talent to be able to create beautiful pieces of music.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, well, we've lost one of the greatest movie composers of all time in the last week, Ennio Morricone, and when you think back to what he was doing in the mid to late 60s, when he started off with Sergio Leone doing the Dollars trilogy and the other stuff that he did, and when you listen back to those pieces, it's orchestral, but it's really left field with the sound effects. Who would have thought about putting whip cracks and stuff into an orchestral piece, and all those sound effects and those really, I say weird, but unusual voice, vocal orchestrations that are in there. Yeah, I mean, it's like
or these these westerns, and you're thinking, Western, you'd think country music and stuff, but you have kind of quasi surf guitar basically in them.
That baritone guitar in there.
Yeah,
it's just I did a piece for G4 Software. To demonstrate their Retron, which is the Mellotron plugin that they did for Reason. And as I was flicking through the sounds, trying to come up with some ideas, I hit upon this baritone guitar, which is a staple of the Mellotron. And it was instantly, I put some reverb on it, and it was just like, I am Ennio, and I can do anything I want. So I composed this piece, and I actually called it In Memory of Ennio. And this is years and years, about 10 years ago. But it was just like that was it, and that's what I. And then I started bringing in all those kind of weird horn type sounds that he used to have, and it was just I was just plagiarizing my fellow countrymen. It was just amazing. And it makes you wonder, well, he would never have used anything like this, but I don't think you'd ever get close, could you, to somebody of that genius level. Great loss.
Yeah, but he wasn't like averse to using technology either, though, because the soundtrack to The Thing, which is a great soundtrack, but that's all it's all synthesizer based and so eerie. He was so good.
Him, it wasn't about he wasn't just like the orchestra is my palette and that's where it'll be. It's just like the melody is the most important thing. The song, and however I get there, whether I use weird sounds or whatever, it's just the
mission as well. Some of the sound that is unbelievable. Sorry, Chris.
Oh yeah, no, I just thinking about the type of composer, and to think about some of the modern composers are perhaps a little bit more like him, and their ability to bring together various and different types of sounds. And I'm thinking like Hans Zimmer or Junkie XL, where for one part they're scoring an orchestra that's standing in a room watching this thing, and the other time they're at the wall of synthesizers turning knobs to make things happen, and then another moment they're at the computer, and it's just kind of a bringing of all those things together.
Yeah. Anyway, so there you go. Some symphonic stuff to kick off with, and some sad news about Ennio Morricone. But let's crack on. What else have we got? Let's do a couple here, and then what's the time? We've got loads of time. So I've spoken about this on the show before, but there was an announcement made this week that CME have now got an official shipping date for their Bluetooth MIDI device, which the demonstration they're using here, I could thought of a better way of demonstrating, but they're using this thing. I forget the name of it now. It's this thing that goes on the ring.
It's the wave. Yeah.
But they're using it to mess around with this Juno 60. Which is an interesting use of it. I must look into that. That looks quite cool. But so that's CME's WIDI Master, which is the first of a number of products. Let's see if we can bring up a nice big image of the device. So it's gone through a number of iterations. Here it is. So it's two MIDI plugs basically. One is the brains of the the unit, which contains all the Bluetooth stuff, and then the other one is kind of attached to it, so it doesn't have to be as big, and you don't have to have both of them connected. It's all powered off the MIDI interface itself, and it allows you to pair two sets of WIDI Masters together, so you can control one synth from the other one. So it's point to point, or you can connect it to your iPad, your Mac, or your Windows computer using Bluetooth, and have that do that. They're claiming ultra low latency, as low as 3 milliseconds, which, if true, is very good. There's no external power at all whatsoever. Automatic pairing, so you just plug it in, turn it on, it sees the other one and goes and connects straight away. Or if you need to connect to your computer, you just pair it up in the Bluetooth stuff. Upgrades over Bluetooth if necessary, and it looks very promising. And so much so, this is one of the few pieces of hardware that I backed when they first announced it, and I've managed to get a very low price of like $29 a pair. So I thought, well, I'll get 3 pairs. Just to because the 3 pairs I think is about as much as one will cost full price. So I did that, and hopefully they will ship at the end of the month, so they say. Anybody want to jump in on this one?
I wish I'd have took them up on the the early bird thing, because as I'm learning more about it, it seems as though it's actually really good. Really good. You
still can get it's not so. I mean, I got them for $29 a pair. You can get them for $39 at the moment if you order before next Sunday. So you can do that. So you still get, $39, even if it doesn't work that well. It's not, it's not huge.
Yeah, so it's only the price of a decent MIDI lead, really, isn't it? If you buy a really good quality one.
Yeah.
But I like it. At first, I only saw live. It was just like, oh, that'd be great live. Maybe you can leave them connected in the case, and just get it out, set it up, and get off. But the more I think about it, I'm thinking in here, like anything where I tried to explain this in chat before and missed a word out, and it didn't make any sense. But anywhere that I've got racks, obviously they can be wired MIDI-wise, with an interface at the top. But where there's keyboards, and it's like 2, sometimes 3 wires less, it'd make a big big difference to the chaos.
Yeah,
you know, the wire and chaos.
And that's exactly why I went for it, because I mean, I don't perform live, and even if I did, I wouldn't be playing keyboards live because I can't. I'm just not that good. But I thought for in here, when I've got 2 or 3 synths that might have to go over there, or you know, it's just less cabling and less stuff to worry about. And I say, if the latency is as good as they said it's going to be, and they reckon it can work up to 20 meters apart, from the 2 things, that's pretty damn good. They've also promised they're doing a USB hub that will plug into your computer or whatever, and allow you to connect multiple WIDI masters to this USB hub, and then have those all as independent MIDI connections on your device, which sounds pretty cool. I think
it needs that, really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you would need some way of doing that.
Yeah, and this is I mean, this is a really good place to start. And of course, I guess guitar players, wind instrument, MIDI wind instrument players, anybody that that requires motion are going to love this kind of thing. Cryss, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great product and a really interesting thing to do, especially since they can get the latency times down so small. I was thinking about it, so I think I heard it from you, Robbie, about this, and went and checked it out. But by the time it was already at the $39 stage. Mm-hmm. I mean, at $29, yeah, I think I would have gotten some.
Yeah.
Not that that's that much different, but it's one of those things that I don't need, but it's a really cool idea. And I thought, maybe this week I'll reconsider, but it's kind of one of those things that I'd like to have to see if it would work out really well or if it'd be worth the money. Right now, I've got everything set up and it's cabled and it's out of the way. And I'm pretty much a neat freak about how I've set up studio and pedal boards and that kind of thing. So it definitely appeals to me. We'll probably end up holding off and then seeing what other options there are in the future, because if they come out with a couple different other devices or hubs, as you were saying, then I might see what package is going to work for me the best.
Yeah.
But
it'd be good if they license the technology out, so like manufacturers could build it into the synth.
Yeah.
That'd be really good.
Yeah.
I can imagine somebody like Behringer taking that straight on board, WIDI compatible and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they can license it and then build it into devices as an option. So, you have a USB connection, you have maybe a physical MIDI connection, and the option of wireless as well.
They should have called it BIDI.
They should have called it what, sorry?
BIDI.
BIDI.
Bluetooth MIDI.
Yeah. I mean, Bluetooth comes in for a lot of stick because, rightly so, it wasn't, in terms of this kind of thing, it wasn't in many ways kind of up to the task up until version 5. The industry that I work in during, in my day job, we do a lot of stuff with Bluetooth that requires, solid connection, speed of transfer of data, and it's there. I mean, it is there. So obviously that's different to musical stuff, where latency is an absolute, very important thing. I'm just trying.
I can imagine. Just looking in the chat room, they're talking about having this set up, and Aaron and Perfect said, "Imagine all those 80 cables being wireless and the wall of interference that would probably create." And I just had this image of my mind of walking out of my room, my little studio room, and my wife saying, "Hey, you okay?" I'm like, "Who are you?"
I've been slowly cooking from the inside. So I mentioned this thing called the WIDI, the USB WIDI hub. So here it says WIDI family. WIDI Master is our first member of the WIDI family. Next up is the TRS WIDI jack. So this is to go into a TRS port on, when you've got things like the Uno drum, the Uno synth, some of these others that have the 3.5 or the 2.5 mil TRS ports. So they're developing a version of this that will just plug into the TRS port, which is interesting. They did actually have a question. They posted this question on their Facebook page asking, should it be 3.5 mil? Should it be 2.5 mil? And because there wasn't for a while, there wasn't a standard, but then the MIDI Association kind of put their foot down and said, no, the standard is 2.5 mil. And not everyone has agreed with that or likes that, but I kind of prefer it because it means that at least I don't get my 3.5 mils and my 2.5 mils mixed up, and it's so anyway. I don't know whether they've gone for 2.5 or 3.5. Maybe they'll do both. I don't know. But then the other thing they're talking about here is WIDI U-Host. It's a USB solution that I read somewhere will just plug in and give you multiple connections on a single USB port. So again, it'll be interesting to see. But if you want to find more information about the upcoming crowd projects, it's all available on the CMI page here, where they're talking about the WIDI Master, WIDI U-Host, WIDI PED 3, so it's like a pedal thing. I don't know. They've got a whole bunch of ideas for this whole wireless MIDI thing, so they're really going for it, which is nice to see.
They've been working with wireless MIDI for a while too. I've got the CME X key that the Bluetooth model, and that's one of my most used controllers. Actually, it's different. Like if you're really sensitive about keyboards, it has a much different feel to it. But usually when I'm sitting and recording, and if I'm not using a hardware synthesizer, usually that's what I'm using.
Yeah.
And it's nice. I mean, I can plug it in for less latency here in this room, but if I'm out in the living room and I just want to play through some stuff while watching TV, then I'll just grab it and use it wirelessly.
Yeah.
So I like to see that, some companies that are really forward thinking like CME.
Yeah. I've always been perplexed about wireless stuff. And when I say wireless, I'm just I'm talking about things that normally connect with wires and how they can be replaced with a non-physical solution.
Yeah.
And there have been successes and there have been failures. I mean, your regular, home phone now, they've been wireless for as long as as I can remember, and they're good quality, and and it works. But when it comes to, say, speaker connections, one of the things I love my surround sound, and so I used to have a 5.1 system in here, which I dismantled because I wasn't really using it. But I've got one downstairs in the room where we have our PlayStation set up. Got another one in the front room where the big TV is, and of course the big problem there is the wife annoyance factor. And she hates having all of these cables, and I hate having to go through and cable all of this in. Sony, I think, came up with about 20 years ago, came up with a wireless connection for speakers, but it introduced obviously a little bit of latency, and that there's already kind of natural latency in surround sound because things appearing in different times in different places, and it was just sending things all over the place, and it wasn't great, so it never really took off. So speakers have always been when it comes to multi-speaker setups, it's still a cabled thing, and the hardened audiophiles would never entertain wireless speakers.
We've got
at least that's. Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, we've got quite a few wireless solutions live, with Electro 80s when we go out. We've got like wireless in-ear monitoring, wireless mics, guitar packs. I think it stops there. But if you add wireless MIDI to that, I was thinking about Roger Lyons earlier. Like some of the pictures that he shows of his live setup. It's like 3 main stage computers. There's wires, audio interfaces, MIDI interfaces, and there's wires everywhere. You could just like Bluetooth straight to those, couldn't you? From the keyboard with the wireless MIDI on it. If they do a wireless speak-on connector as well for the for the PA system, it'd just be a matter of going round at the end and putting a load of stuff into a bag. There's like no wrapping up wires.
Because that's the worst bit, isn't it? That's the worst bit of of loading in and loading out is the cable.
And the one thing that's worse than actually winding the cables up correctly is teaching somebody else how to do it.
What are you doing?
Yeah. and those people that tie the cables in knots, and
Yeah. And you can have anybody roadieing for you with this stuff. You just got to pull it all out at the end of the night.
Well,
I think it's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, fingers crossed. In a few weeks' time, I'll have a few pairs, and we'll be able to demonstrate.
Yeah, one of the things too that's helped. You're talking about audiophiles and the quality of wireless signals. I mean, it has increased quite a bit in that. I mean, even thinking about non-synthesizer instruments. The back in the day, you think when everybody was doing the stadiums and stuff and the packs that they had, and it just absolutely mangled and destroyed your guitar tone. And it wasn't until relatively recently, like maybe 10 years ago or so, that all of a sudden there was that jump in quality to where, I had gotten one of the, I think it was after Yamaha bought out Line 6, but they had changed their technology and they had a unit came out that was lower latency and had a really good tone. It was still a bit different than plugging straight in, but good enough that you could get away with it live. And now we've gone another level. I think I've got a Shure unit now. I don't remember which one it is, but for playing live with the guitar, that, man, live, it sounds so close that even I don't really feel like I'm noticing it as I'm playing, whereas before I always did. So with these, and I've never had any dropout problems with it either. With the older one, maybe like 10 years ago, I would have a dropout every once in a while, but with the new system, never any problems. Works great, can run around. And the most important thing is, from a band perspective, when the sound guy is screwing you over, you can actually walk out there and do something about it and listen to it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll soon see a world where cables are increasingly a thing of the past. But I think it might be beyond our times. Realistically, I just don't see it happening. But this is a step towards, and so the news there again is CME announcing the shipping date. If you have placed a pre-order, they do start shipping on July 21st. So that's it's not too far away now. If you order now, you should start to get your stuff around the first week of August. But I'm hoping that by the time I have a couple of weeks off from work, that those will have arrived and I'll be able to test that. It would be great if I could fire up the Fairlight and leave it in the garage and then just use wireless MIDI to control it from up here. I do know of people who have plumbed the audio. They've the cables and everything, from a remote room. Like my colleague in Sydney has a cupboard underneath his stairs, and his studio is up in the loft. So he's put the rack mount Series 3 in there with some ventilation, and he's just plumbed the audio and everything up through. So all he has in his room is just the keyboard and the monitor, which is very nice. But
this is the keyboardist version of when the guitarist gets the first wireless. Yeah, like you got to crank your amp up and then you walk outside and then go have a drink at the neighbor's house. And you're like, I'm still playing.
That's me.
Next up, wireless power. That's what we need, is wireless power. Well, we could have had it, but
Tesla's going to do it. When he was all up for that.
Nikola Tesla.
Yeah. He was onto that back then.
Oh yeah,
whenever it was.
Yeah, indeed. So who knows? Wireless. I mean, it's there. It's all around us. We just need to harness it. Anyway, there we go. CME wireless MIDI shipping in a couple of weeks' time, which is good news. Let's do this one. This caught my eye, and again, wanted to test this out. So I think let's start with the software, because some people might know this little plugin called BlueARP. It's an arpeggiator stroke pattern sequencer, and it just basically allows you to create some really interesting patterns based on a whole bunch of inputs that you put into the system. and you can then just connect it up to any the software version. You connect it up to anything that's connected to your DAW, and have this arpeggiate it in all number of ways. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't test this. I wasn't familiar with this. I know it's been around for a while, but I couldn't test this because of the whole Catalina thing. Unfortunately, even though this was updated in April of this year, it's still not compatible and not passing those damned Catalina tests. But the interesting thing is that from this, the developer has come up with a hardware version that is now in a pre-production phase. Let's have a little listen to see what it's doing here. So all he's got here is he's got a Roland controller keyboard connected to a Korg Electribe, and is that the Korg Radius? So the box is sending 4 parts MIDI to the Radius, and the clock signals going through to the Electribe. So everything you hear here is he's playing, the notes and the chords on the keyboard. But the BlueARP is doing all of this arpeggiation and note triggering. And it sounds very good. It sounds like a very clever piece of equipment. What do you think, guys? Who wants to go?
Go for it, Ben.
I'm slightly familiar with the software version now. I couldn't seem to get hold of a video where I could see the hardware actually being programmed, as it were. So I don't know what that workflow is. But the software, he said that he wanted to create something that had all the best elements from all the hardware sequences that were out there. Mm-hmm. And he really seems to have done that. It's so easy to use, and it's so powerful. You can. I love the lane thing, where you can go like to chords or ties, or it's just so intuitive, that way of programming.
Yeah.
And I think for anybody doing these like live jam things, it's going to be absolutely fantastic for that.
Yeah, definitely.
The doorless jams, it's perfect for it. Whether I'd use it personally, I don't know. I'm quite happy with the software. I've no need to get the same functionality in another box.
Yeah.
That's taking up room, but it's great.
Yeah, I didn't see any word on how much it would be, but he's currently finalising some pre-production units that they're going to go to the first beta testers. I believe our friend Marshall Arnold is one of those. So be interested to get his take on it. Cryss, what do you think? Something that you would use?
I'm probably the wrong person to comment about it. I do use arpeggiators, but I'm like a really low-level sequencer use. As I've said on a previous show, it's against my religion. So, not that I have any problem listening to sequenced music, but I just, for my workflow, it's not where I usually go. So I'd say I'd probably pass it on to you, Robbie, because I'm not really qualified to talk about it.
Well, okay, so I like arpeggiators as a rule. I think if a synth doesn't have one in there, that it's somewhat lacking.
Actually, one of my my regrets about the 106 that I have is that it didn't have the arpeggiator that the 60 had.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of a bummer because it had a really cool arpeggiator on there.
And I just think it's one of those things that's instantly gratifying, and you can start to come up with ideas. And the amount of times I've sat at a synth with an arpeggiator and just messed around with it and come up with something that I thought was really, really good, and then that's kind of formed the basis of something, and I've either recreated the pattern manually in a DAW, or I've just recorded the audio, or whatever, I've transmitted the MIDI, because not all MIDI arpeggiators are the same or equal. I remember when I had the Yamaha CS1X, it had a lovely arpeggiator built in, but it wouldn't transmit it's MIDI data, so you could clock it to your to whatever you've got it synced to, but the MIDI note data would not transmit over MIDI, so you couldn't record that arpeggiation as notes in a sequencer. So you always had to have it clocked, and it was just a pain. But I was messing around with the Z1 the last couple of days, and that has got an incredible arpeggiator on it, with lots of user slots for your own arpeggiations. But even the presets are really, really good, and because you can put user ones in, you can go on the internet and find lots of other people that have created arpeggiation patterns and then just dump them in. It's great fun. This looks very interesting. And say if you've got synths that don't have arpeggiators, or they've got really basic ones, I can see this being incredibly useful. And like you say, for a doorless jam where people are just putting some stuff together and want something interesting, here's something for you. I was just looking; it seems to have a RAM card or some kind of SD card slot on there, so I guess you can swap patterns around and store them, and it looks very cool. And it's nice to see a piece of software become a piece of hardware, because normally it's the other way around. Yeah, normally it's the other way around. It's a piece of hardware that then gets made into software. So good luck to this guy, and we shall be keeping an eye on him. If you want to go and learn more about it, the software version, which I was blissfully unaware of until recently. Sorry, that's Cryss. It's not the topics. It's Grey Wolf, GRAYWOLF 2004.net. But it's the BlueARP plugin. If you just Google it, you'll come up with that. And it's available as a VST for Windows and Mac. Also, it's available as a MIDI effects plugin, so you can use it with Logic Pro X. Unfortunately, as I said, I've not been able to try it because it wouldn't pass the old Catalina gatekeeper. There must be a way. I had a few plugins like that where you can override the gatekeeper function on Catalina by you just open it by holding Control and then selecting and it will do it. But I haven't found a way of doing that with plugins, and it's annoying the heck out of me, because I'm sure it must be able to be done. If not, got to live with it. But there you go.
Won't it depend if it's 64-bit or not? Is that the problem?
No, because it sees. I mean, I tried to open it in Logic last night, and it sees it, and it successfully validated it within Logic. But as soon as you invoke it, it comes up with the box saying, whatever that little bloody awkward pop-up comes up, and it's just yeah. And I thought, maybe if I try and open the plugin and see if it opens natively in the audio units little app that Apple provide. But no, it wouldn't even do it that way. So I guess I'm just going to have to live with my decision of going to Catalina and wait until he updates it. But there you go.
I wonder, maybe you guys know, so one of the biggest arpeggiator topics lately has been the intelligent one on the Jupiter X and XM.
Oh yes.
Does anybody know if that has been put into Roland Cloud to use with the cloud synthesizers?
I don't think it has. If it has, I've not seen it.
I'm just curious, especially with their Zen.
Yeah.
Like if you create a patch on one piece of gear, you can move it to others. But I was just thinking about that IARP or whatever it's called, and if you make a patch using that on your Jupiter XM, is that going to be able to be played in cloud? Because that's I know
I would fire up
opinions are varied on that, but
I'd fire up something to check it. But I'm conscious of soaking up my CPU. Whilst doing a live stream, but there's one to look into. if anybody in the chat room has got a Roland Cloud subscription and can check that out to see. I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure they would have made mention of it, but it's not there. Talking of which, Roland Cloud have released a whole bunch of new sound packs and patch libraries and so on and so forth for various instruments, so that's nice to see. And I think they've also said that the SH101 Zen Core plugin is coming in the next couple of weeks, which should be interesting.
That will be interesting.
Yeah, run that against the old Behringer and see how it compares.
Yeah,
yeah. Right, another freebie for you. The guys at Zynaptiq, I say the guys, it could be some girls too, have released a free reverb called Subspace, called the Essential All-Pass Reverb plugin. A super lush sounding and totally streamlined reverb plugin. It's based on the All-Pass Reverb module that's found in their Morph 2, Wormhole and Adaptive Herb plugins, and literally features just 2 controls. A switch that selects one of 4 presets and a dry-wet control. That's it. And I played with this last night, and it's nothing stellar. It's certainly not Valhalla territory, but the 4 presets are kind of nice, and I dialed it all the way up to 100% wet. Ooh, misses. And it wasn't overly, it was nice. Sometimes you dial the reverb all the way up, and it's just like, oh, it's just too much. This actually was rather nice, but it's free to anyone that signs up to the Zynaptiq newsletter. That's the only, that's the currency there. Did any of you guys get to try it at all?
I didn't get to. I didn't.
Anyone?
Yeah, I didn't try, but I listened to some sound samples on it, and it seemed like it was pretty dense in the mid-range. Like it was pleasant sounding, but wasn't gonna kick Valhalla out of the bed for it.
No.
I mean, even with Supermassive, it's not, marketed as a reverb plugin, but some of the reverbs on there are actually really good, and it's free.
Yeah, it's a free reverb. It's not earth shattering. It's certainly, like you say, it's not. Valhalla will not be worried at all by another free reverb. But it's small, it's lightweight, and it does a trick, and it's very simple to use. So it gets you somewhere, I suppose. Ben, and you said you didn't try it?
I haven't tried it, but I do think it sounds interesting, because I don't think everything has to. It sounds a bit like weird saying it, but I don't think everything has to sound great. Sometimes something that doesn't sound so great can be a useful effect. If it mushes up the sound in some way, then maybe you can use that for something. So I don't think everything has to be pristine, fidelity, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
It's free. You try it. If you don't like it, get rid. You're not lost anything.
Get rid.
Indeed. And talking of freebies, let's quickly move on to this one. So this is the show where we're talking about stuff that we haven't really been able to try out properly, because this one is Windows only, so it rules me out. But this is, and it's supposed to. I mean, from what I've heard, it sounds very nice. It's an emulation of Kawai's K1 module. This is the K1V. Includes 768 presets, all the factory bank and all the ROM cards, full editing support. It almost sounds like a DexEd, like DexEd was for the DX7. This is that for the K1V. Let's say, unfortunately though, Windows only at the moment. Mac and Linux support is in development, so I shall hang fire on that one. But did anyone get a chance to play with this?
I'm Mac as well, so I haven't yet. No. But I'm looking forward to the Mac version of it, because it looks pretty decent.
Yeah, and the demos sound great. So
yeah,
this is kind of like, people moan about Romplers, but this is a late '80s Rompler, so it's not. The original was always that unique wedge-shaped little box. Which I don't think was, because it's 8-bit synthesis engine. I don't know what the DACs were on the original, whether they were close, because it was 88, so it probably was. It could have been 16-bit. But no, it sounds nice. Chris, did you manage to have a look at this at all?
Yeah, I listened to it online. Obviously I'm a Mac user also, but the thing about it is, the funny thing is that if you try to make some things really realistic, but you just barely miss it, You're like, that just doesn't sound quite right. But if you miss it by a long ways, like that sounds cool and retro. I mean, the Mellotron is completely that, right?
Yeah.
They're like
Yeah,
nobody's
yeah.
mistaking Mellotron vocal, choirs or strings or whatever. It just has that sound. But I think there was some sound demos and the drums were great. They had that just late '80s to the max sound.
Yeah.
And then there was a playthrough video where they're playing the sounds, and they sound, it just sounds a little bit clunky. But I was thinking, especially given the conversation in the chat room, is like, this would be the perfect thing that you would take those early '90s or late '80s sounds and you would put them through some really beautiful reverb or chorus or something, and it would be just that perfect thing that would just say, this is retro, and it's not trying to sound like real strings or anything. It just has the early Rompler sound.
Yeah, let's play a little clip of the video for people to listen to. There's those drums.
There it is.
Yeah, so distinctly of its time, it definitely sounds. I mean,
if you took that, if you took that kind of music and you just added some late '80s guitar, like you'd have TV show bumper music right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it sounds quite cool.
It sounds wonderfully awful.
Yeah. Exactly, which is why I like it. I was just really disappointed that I couldn't play with it. I might actually. I think I've got a Windows VM that I should have just stuck it on there and had to play around. But yeah, there you go. That's Nils Schneider, I believe his full name is, and the website is nilsschneider.de.
Yeah, I think this is definitely hitting that same market that some of these other free plugins have. Whether it's PG8X or like some of the full bucket stuff too. I mean, having the Poly 800, where it's just like it's those things that are a little bit those sounds are a little bit lost to time, and when you hear them, you're like it kind of takes you to that place, either good or bad. But they're so much fun, and especially if that was, the early days of your experience with synthesizers, it can be really fun and very retro.
Yeah, no, it's I'm a big fan of this, and from what I've heard, and hopefully you won't disappoint in usage. So yeah, nilsschneider.de is the website. NILSSCHNEIDER.
So that
sorry.
That actually works. Sorry, Robbie. Before we move on, that actually works as an editor as well, like Dex does for the DX7.
Yeah, well, it says here full editing support in the features. So and it says it can import and export sysx presets and banks to the original device.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, transmits and receives parameter changes via sysx to act as an editor for the hardware or to be edited with external editors. So what's going to happen now? You're going to start seeing the prices of Kawai K1s start to skyrocket on eBay. I can integrate it now with. I think this, again, this is that whole DexEd thing. That now you've got this plugin that does everything that the synthesizer does, but also if you've got the hardware, you can use it as an editor librarian and use that as a plugin, and it's just I like that.
Best of everything in it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It is, it's like having your cake and eating it. Brilliant stuff. Right, let's do one joint topic, and then we'll move on to the biggie, the discussion piece, which will take us probably through till the end of the show. So this one, it's IK Multimedia, who are kind of going through a bit of a phase at the moment of just eking little things out here and there, little updates to this, little updates to that, little additions to this. We had the the Joe Satriani library for Amplitude, which Cryss has done a very good video for. I urge you to go and watch that if you are into guitar modelled amps and so on and so forth. But MODO Drum and MODO Bass have now got an SE edition, which is just a cut down version. So MODO Drum offers 2 drum kits, the jazz drum kit and the studio drum kit. You can still adjust every element of the sound just as you can with the full version, but you just don't get so many kits. MODO Bass is kind of the same. You get a 60s precision bass and a 70s precision bass, or P bass as they call it, because they don't want to get their wrists slapped. Again, retaining all the control. Now, I do have both MODO Drum and MODO Bass, and MODO Bass is fantastic for knocking up authentic bass guitar lines. And MODO Drum's actually not that bad as it's mostly a physically modelled drum kit, although it does have samples for things like the cymbals. And I used it with my E-drum kit, and it's pretty good. With the nuanced stuff and the location of the strike on the pad, it picks that up really nicely. It's very, very good stuff. And these cut down SE editions are available for $149.99 each. If you're looking for something that gives you, physically modelled bass and drums with just an amazing level of control. For example, with the drums, you can mess around with the types of the tip of the sticks, the different types of beaters, whether it's sticks, hot rods, felt beaters. You can adjust the sound on every part of the drum head. You can adjust the tuning, of course, and it's very, very detailed stuff. And it's a lot less space on your hard drive than, say, something like Superior Drummer 3. Anybody want to pass comment on these?
Well, we've got like a little bit of a story about this, because we both only thought that there was one thing, but luckily we both latched onto a different one each. I thought it was just MODO Bass, and Cryss thought it was just MODO Drums. He went off and looked at MODO Drums, and I went off looking at the bass. So that's the way that we're going to have to...
Right.
The bass is fantastic. It's so customizable.
Yeah.
You can move the pickup. You can change the pickup to any pickup that is available, and move it anywhere beneath the strings. You can add more strings. Just like if you want 6 strings instead of 4, you can add them. You can even change the tuning pegs at the top, I believe.
Yeah.
And it just sounds so real, and it's got all those. Did they call them key zones, where you press something and it changes? You press a key that's out of the range, and it changes the playing style.
That's right. Yeah.
You can use that for slides and harmonics, and it's just amazing. I've got some kind of bass plugin that was quite expensive, but it's just one type of bass guitar, and I believe they do like a full range of it. Like a I don't know, Stingray or a Precision or a Fender Jazz or whatever. You've got to buy them individually, and you get a discount for each one you buy. But the value for this, which to me sounds exactly as the same, if not better, 140. What is it? £149.
Yeah, £149.99 for the SE version.
Yeah, that's a bargain. That, I think. And they say you get the 70s and the 60s P bass. Is that just 2 basses then?
Yeah, you just get 2 basses in the SE version, but you still retain all of the control. But obviously the full version, which I've got up on the screen at the moment, you've got those 2, plus you've got the jazz bass, you've got the devil bass. I mean, these are all their names. But there's a Ricky, there's a Hofner violin, there's the Thunder, the Gibson basses, also, and say all of those, with their own distinctive tones, and then of course you can mess around with the positioning of the pickups, the strings, the gauge. It's just every aspect of it, and it's all physically modeled. So it's very lightweight. I've got this running on my MacBook because it's just it doesn't take up much space at all, and you can mess around with the amp, the effects, the electronics. I can't remember you can mess around with the different types of electronics in there, and change the strings and the playing style. Picked and slapped and fingered. I always hate saying that because it just sorry, I'm fingering my bass. Because the missus has gone out for the night. So, yeah, it's incredibly detailed. So what about the drums then, Cryss? What did you think about the drums?
Yeah, so I went back and rewatched it because, I saw some stuff when the full program came out initially. And, the MODO drums is an interesting thing, as you said, because it's modeled. You can really go in and change some of the things you can't in, say, another program like Superior Drummer, Easy Drummer or something. I use Easy Drummer usually. And so having control over the pitch and not having to change a sample with that, they're showing the graphical user interface where, you're picking out the tuning and the type, of the bass drum heads on either side. Plus, you can set the size and the depth of the modeling of the physical bass drum, or on the snare, you can select it so, like it's like an infinite round robin. So, a snare hit is not that same thing every time like you have on a drum machine, but you can have separate right and left hands going at the same, that will be hitting a different place like a real drummer. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting concept, and I imagine maybe you can tell me, because I didn't look into the bass, and it's not something. I play bass, so it would be a lot more work for me to use the bass Mondo bass than it would be to grab a bass off the wall and track, and which is something that I love anyway. But Amplitude's it's got some really great bass amps in there. In fact, MPEG collection, I don't even use anything else anymore unless I need like a brighter tone. I'll get their older Galli and Kruger. Mm-hmm. But I most of the time I use if I want my regular tone is their it's one of the SVT heads. It's the one with the silver face and the blue on it. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what their model numbers are, but it sounds amazing. I just grab either my Stingray or my Rickenbacker and use that, or if I want like a old school tone, to use their Ampeg flip top, just vintage 60s vacuum tube bass amp 115. And so, Robbie, on the Mondo bass, does it have any amp modeling built into that, or is that something you just run into Amplitude or whatever bass software you want?
It does have its own amps, and I'm just trying to call up the list here of what's included. So it has its own amps and effects, so you don't have to run it through anything else. And I believe that those are borrowed from Amplitude, or certainly from the Amplitude library. I'm just trying to see.
Yeah, one of the nice things about IK Multimedia stuff is because they've modeled such an extensive library of effects and gear that when you pull up something like Sample Tank's not my favorite, and now that I have the Spitfire BBC, I'm just going to go there. But if you're pulling up Sample Tank or Syntronik or probably these, as well as Amplitude, like all their compressors and effects models and stuff, being able to use those, and they're really good sounding. I also use their T-Racks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and being able to have access to that in something like Mondo bass, you're getting a lot for your money with it.
Yeah, so it says here, let's bring this on the screen. So Modo bass, you have full control over the signal path and get 7 bass effects, stomp box effects, 2 classic bass amps. Choose from an octave, distortion, chorus, compressor, delay, envelope filter, or graphic EQ. Each stomp box has been derived from world-class models in the Amplitude custom shop. Each gives you full control over the effect applied to the signal, parameter adjustment, and their overall output volume into the next effect. blah 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 blah. But yeah, it's all there, and it's all.
What do they have listed for the 2 amps in it?
Choose from a classic all-tube amplifier and a 1x15 cab, or you can choose a powerhouse solid-state model with a 4x10 cab. Each amp gives you full control over gain structure, EQ with mid-frequency adjustment on the tube amp, and additional fine-tuning options with a graphic EQ. So yeah, it's fairly comprehensive stuff.
I don't use much acoustic bass in the things that I do, but I think the SE version would probably cover everything I needed, you know.
Yeah.
Because I only use it. If I'm working on an 80s track that had real bass on it, that would be the only time I use it, because I would tend, not that I prefer the sound, but I would tend to use a synth bass in an original composition.
Yeah.
And it's only when I'm trying to recreate something else. I have got a real bass, but
it's the level of detail that they go into, like, you know, with the strings. You know, you can change the number of strings up to 6. You know, so you can have a 6-string bass. You can mess around with the drop and the action. You can have your string type, your string gauge, your string age. So you've got all of those different settings just for the strings. Then you've got the electronics. So, you know, you can choose the type of pickups, the location of the pickups, you know, the bridge, the neck, whether it's active or passive, you know, all of this stuff. And you can just mix and match to your heart's content until you get, you know, the thing that you want, which is really, really good. I hear a lot of people talking at the moment about the Tune Track one. Yeah, Easy Bass, I think it's called.
I think that's the one I've got.
Ah, right. And they're all raving about that, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, you know, IK were doing this like last year, or actually probably before that, I think, because the new, it's a good couple of years old. But as you can see on screen, you know, all the different types of bass guitar, you know, based on Hofner violins, Ricky 4003s, Yamahas, Gibsons, Warwicks, Ibanez, Music Man Stingrays, Fender Jazz, Fender Precision, Dingwall, and Federa. You know, there's all sorts of options in there, but you know, if you want to just get in regular bass, SE sounds like it's the way to go. I mean,
and probably you know, to just pick out one bass to use, the Precision is a good choice. I'm not really into precision basses so much, but if you were to pick something that fits a lot of different styles really well, that's just a standard sounding from R&B to rock.
Yeah.
That would probably be it. Unless you're popping and slapping, then Precision sounds terrible.
Yeah, but then, you know, I've seen people, you know, using...
Get a jazz bass or a Stingray.
Yeah, they use the jazz version. But I have seen people use, you know, I guess it all depends on your technique and what have you. But, yeah, it is a very good all-round guitar. And going back to MODO drum, you know, being a drummer and an E-drummer as well, you know, it's... I mean, I'm Superior Drummer 3 all the way down the line because it's just so deep and so incredibly good sound. The only thing that I didn't like about MODO drum was that some of the sounds didn't quite have the authenticity. I don't think it had the range of authenticity throughout, you know, the different, you know, velocities and you know, positions, you know, so when you're hitting around the edge of the skin rather than, you know the center of the drum head, they didn't seem to be the range that the Superior drummer has, because I mean, God, those guys take months to record, you know, and the round robins that go in there. So, but that said, there's a huge amount of control that you can have with MODO drum, and it sits on my laptop, you know, that I use for my drums, and I mess around and play with both.
Here's an interesting one for you. Just, it seems as though like drummers and bass players are you don't get that many like guitar emulations, do you? Like the old General MIDI guitar that used to sound like bagpipes. It sounded absolutely nothing like a guitar at all. And I think Steinberg made Virtual Guitarist a while back. It was a little bit more realistic because it did strumming and that. But it seems as though drummers, they've always had it hard with it, like with electronics taking over. Even in 1987, it was the drummer and the bass player that got missed off our recordings in Strawberry.
Yeah,
because the technology was we used an emulator for the bass, and we used, oh god, what was it? I can't remember what we used for the drums now, but it was some rolling thing. And it just seems as though they've always took the brunt of it.
Yeah,
and
we do.
And now Spitfire have got the orchestras in the site, so they're taking the brunt of it. It's going to be the next generation of musicians are going to think, well, there's only two things worth playing: guitar and keyboards. It's like, I can do everything else.
Well, the thing is, I think I told you the story when the band that I was in, sort of like towards the end of the 80s, we went to do a demo. We couldn't fit the drum kit because it was a bedroom studio. I had a big 8-piece Tama drum kit, and we couldn't. There was just absolutely no way we could fit it in, let alone mic it up, and get away with without annoying the neighbours. So they said, here you go, here's a drum machine, program your parts. I was like, fucking hell. this is how it's going to go. You might as well just dig your own grave. Here you go, dig your own grave. Thank you very much.
But that's what they said to me. But I had to do everybody's bits.
Yeah.
The studio was a full live band, and then it was like these two aren't playing. You're going to have to sort their bits out. It's like, what?
It's funny you should mention about guitarists and them not having to worry about kind of the influx of plugins and technology to replace them. I recently had a track rejected for a compilation album because I'd used a guitar on it. But in actual fact, I hadn't used a guitar. I'd used a plugin, which was a scripted plugin that features samples mostly of the Stratocaster. And I wrote this track, and I thought it needs something here. And I thought, it would be great if I could have a guitar, like a Nile Rodgers type, that kind of thing. And so I can't play guitar, and I didn't know anybody who could do it. So I looked at this plugin, and this is the plugin that I used. It's Rob Pappin's RG, and it's a Reason rack extension, and it's one of these things where you just like hold down the chord and choose the style, and then it does the style for you. So it's a rhythm guitar thing, and I thought it sounded great. So I submitted this track, and one of the criteria for submission was that no guitars. It has to be synthesizers, drum machines, and that's pretty much it. And so I submitted this track, and they came back and they said, "Oh, we can't accept this because it's got guitar in it." I said, "Well, no, actually, it hasn't. It's a plug-in." They said, "Well, it's a guitar," and they said they wouldn't let my track on the compilation because that's what they tell me. They probably just it was just rubbish, and it was an excuse to say not to have it on. But there you go. So and actually that's a really cool plugin.
Yeah, Torsten in the chat room, he regularly tries to put one over on people, including me. So like, yeah, I play guitar, and then, or maybe he just said he had a guitar. I don't remember. So he sends me over this acoustic guitar track that's just like very fancy finger pick stuff. I had to listen like, oh, he's really good. That's pretty awesome. And then he'd said something else, and I thought about it, and I went like, oh, I'm gonna go back and listen to that again. I listened to it like, hey, that's not a real guitar, is it? But it was done so well that, like, again, when I went back, I listened to it, and I said that before he told me what it was. So I it wasn't after the fact. I was like, oh, that was a king. But when I listened to it, I just thought it was an acoustic guitar. It was done. So both the sound of it was good, but then also the way that he understood the mindset of how to make that sound like an acoustic guitarist, not just an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really well done. Sometimes like when you hear even the really good keyboard samples of guitars, like that Clark Technic, the Dimension D one, I don't remember what it's called. There's the demo that I sent over to Jamie last week. the guy who did it used one of the Yamaha, what's MODX, or what's that one called? I don't remember.
Yeah.
The whatever the new one is. But he had so he played some with a synthesizer and then some with this Yamaha, and so it was a guitar sound. And again, you're not seeing anything being played; it just shows a picture of the unit. I was listening to it, I was like, that's an interesting, that's a good guitar tone. But like, it was so I was like, oh, there's a lot of compression on there. I was trying to think, like, every note is like exactly the same. And then I was thinking about it. I scanned back in the video because I hadn't been looking at it, and at the beginning it said Yamaha whatever MODX or whatever
montage or something. Yeah.
And one of those. And I said, they're getting good enough that if you're not paying attention, like, it'll pass like, oh yeah, that's a nice acoustic guitar sound or something. But yeah, then you go back and listen to like, but honestly, I don't know if it would catch anybody else's ears. It's just I'm used, I've been playing guitar for almost 30 years, so that I
think it's
pick up
or
on
something.
it.
Yeah, pads or something. They work great. I've got the Motif X something rack, and that's got guitar sounds in it. And when you play them, they're like, oh yeah, it's pretty reasonable. But each patch has got its own arpeggiator settings. And they've got like arpeggiations that sound like strumming, or different styles of strumming, and they're really quite useful. Just in the mix, low down. They're totally, for me anyway, totally passable. It's not the kind of thing I use, but I know when I'm going through the sounds and the arpeggios, I think, wow, that's not bad. That's not bad for an arpeggio and a sample or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this guy. He's a French sound designer. His company's called Acoustic Samples, and they're libraries for UVI's Falcon and Workstation. And he has done a few guitars. He's got a Gibson Sunbird. There's also, I think it's a Yamaha acoustic, a Fender Strat, and he also did a Telecaster, I think, for UVI themselves under their own brand. And these are all scripted front ends, and they are incredibly good. So you have a solo mode, a chord mode, a pattern mode, and a MIDI guitar mode. So if you have a MIDI guitar, you can hook it up to this, and it should work, really nicely. You can also set it up so that you can say, like, for example, it's got a chord mode, and you set it to piano chord mode. So when you press, when you play a C7 something or other, whatever, obviously the way you play that on a piano is the sequence of notes is different than what you would strum on a guitar. And it does all of that translation for you automatically. So it'll play the right intonation. Is that the correct word? Intonate? I don't know. But it'll play the right version of that chord as it would be on a guitar, but you don't have to learn how to play that. You just play it on the keyboard. Interval, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And
plus,
the voicing.
Having, the mimicking the one by one, either if like if you're strumming a guitar, you're not hitting all those notes exactly at once. So I think the best keyboardists that do guitar type stuff, they've learned how to do that little shift as they play a chord to make it sound like a pick is raking down the strings.
Yeah.
Now, coming from the other side of it, so for years and years gigging, that sometimes would have a keyboardist or sometimes not. And if I was doing live stuff and, say maybe there was a rhythm guitarist and I was a lead guitarist, and I had a little more room to play, I always enjoyed that. But if we didn't have a keyboardist, then, the one thing that sounds, just as bad or worse even than synthesizers trying to sound like guitars is any sort of box or effects thing that tries to make a guitar sound like a synthesizer.
Yeah.
They just sound terrible. They don't track well. But what I would end up using is a guitar that I could pinky swell with the volume control, and then using delay and chorus and reverb. And then I could strike a chord or whatever, and then swell it on into the delay, and it would just create this beautiful pad sound. But it was great for playing live because people would be looking around for the synthesizer.
Yeah.
Like, where's that sound coming back? Or even if somebody hadn't, I mean, it's everybody does it these days, but back when it started doing it, wasn't that common. I mean, Eddie Van Halen did the kind of cathedral thing where he does that back in the 80s, but like many people didn't know you could do that with a guitar, or a lot of guitars just didn't use effects. So it was always kind of a fun thing that even if you were like guesting with somebody and they'd be like, turn it around, like, we didn't hire a keyboardist.
Yeah. So, yeah. So there's lots to choose from if you're looking to replace your guitarist, because, you know, who wouldn't? You know, they're the ones with the big egos in the band.
Arseholes.
No, it's the lead singers. I reserve that ire for the lead singers alone.
Yeah, we have to stick together on this.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, you're right.
Very quickly, just one last thing from IK Multimedia, which is that they've brought their Syntronik iOS service into the subscription era, basically. So you can download Syntronik CS for iOS now, for iPhone and iPad. It's completely free, and you get 7 carefully selected instrument presets from 4 synthesizer models that allow you to get started experimenting, blah, blah, blah. The new update introduces a monthly subscription service for unlimited access to all of Syntronik's 44 classic synth 1600 presets and all features unlocked for just $10 a month, with a free month's trial available. Previously in that, purchase and bundles are still available and will be accessible to everyone who bought those, so you're not going to lose anything. I quite like the Syntronik stuff, just for the kind of quick and easy, gratifying, you know, if you just want particular sounds. But I'm not really into mobile music making. I really did try in the early days, but just I could never. It was always very unfulfilling. But not bad. $10 a month for 44 instruments. Does anybody use iOS or for music?
If it was a package that transferred onto the desktop as well, I think it might be something that I would be interested in. But like yourself, it's not really something that's caught on with me. I don't find myself grabbing the iPad and trying to make a tune on it. I might use the iPad as a remote, or you know, an MPE controller or a sequencer, but on its own, you know, no, it's not really. I don't know.
No, it's. I mean, I think there are some. I think the iPhone itself is not really a great tool for using, you know, for music. Although saying that, you know, I do quite like GarageBand on there. I'm getting quite proficient at knocking up, you know, ideas on there. But I would rather have had it on, you know, have it on an iPad, although I don't have one anymore. And even, you know, Apple's own Logic Control app, you know, on the iPhone you get one fader because that's, you know, that's all they can fit on there. Whereas with the iPad you get, you know, 8 at least that you can mess around with. It's more useful.
It's a brilliant controller. It's a brilliant remote controller. That combination is awesome.
Chris, are you into mobile music?
Not really. I'm just, you know, I have an iPhone, and it's just something that I use. I'm passionate about laptops, so I like my MacBook, and that's what I want to do everything on. I don't want to type and write on the phone. In fact, if I have to text somebody, I usually just wait till I get to the computer, unless it's, you know, something that really has to be addressed. Yeah. So, you know, I do enjoy watching the Sound Room on YouTube. He's got some great stuff. In fact, he had sent me a friend request, and I sent him back a message inviting him to Pro Synth Network. He said he was going to get on there, but I guess he never followed through with it. So if any of you guys are friends with him, please tell him we'd like to have him in there. But I think he's really mastered it. And he does so many like iPad synth reviews, and he has that setup where I can't remember what the other software is, where he's able to bring in multiple things and have them run at once. Yeah. But there has been some great synthesizers for the iOS or Android. Native VS just brought up the Moog stuff, the Model 15, and I've got the Mini Moog one and the VCS 3. app. I don't remember what it's called. Some of the chord
Animogue
stuff
was good as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so, but I haven't worked it into again my setup. To I at one point I figured it all out, but then I was like trying to keep that all in my head to remember how to use it. Like I just have other stuff plugins that are much easier to use.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree with Ben. Like if for the $10 a month, like compared to $20 for what Roland gives you, I don't think the Syntronik's worth that much.
No.
If they allowed you to do it on all your devices, maybe that would go a little bit further. I do have Syntronik for my laptop, and I use it in Logic. And like I said, it's hit and miss as far as if you want grungy, dirty, like old sounding synthesizer stuff, like don't go there. If you want beautiful, pristine, vintage-inspired, spacious sounds, it's got some really nice stuff.
Yeah.
And in fact, actually, what's kind of funny is like I'm not a fan as far as vintage polysynths go. But yeah, I just got to make sure Simon's not in the chat room right now. I don't care for the Memory Moog. I think it sounds awful, to be honest. I know everybody loves that one, but I think all the other vintage, the Jupiter and CS80 and all of those sound much better.
Yeah.
But the Memory Moog one in Syntronik sounds pretty good, and I use that for some lead sounds. Actually, they've got some great patches in there they're wonderful sounding, and they're like it, I think the Syntronik really lends itself for the Juno type sound, where it just beautiful pads, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's something that I'll go in there. I won't make presets for it, but I'll go in there, I'll scan some of theirs, and I've had some pretty good results with it.
Yeah. I was just wondering, with Apple moving to their own silicon for Macs and for MacBooks and desktops, iMacs, whether this sort of thing will eventually cross over and just become this homogeneous offering, because that's clearly where Apple are going, for this unified operating system that goes across all their devices. So maybe this...
Do you reckon the migration from one platform to another will be like really easy once the silicon's implemented?
And you'll be able to run iOS apps on macOS and possibly vice versa. There might be a nice version of Logic on an iPad one day. I was a heavy Reason user for many years, and when the iPad came out and we had GarageBand for iPad, and that connectivity between the tablet and the desktop, where you could start writing something on one and then just bounce it over and carry on and improve on the other, or vice versa. I always wanted Reason to do something like that, and they just tried with 2 or 3 different apps. There was one called Figure, another one called Take, and then there's Reason Mobile now, which again seems to have died a death, because they promised lots of stuff, but it just wasn't viable. That's the only thing that I could ever use, or ever saw myself using mobile music making tools, because there was that it's that fact that I'm away from home, maybe I'm on vacation somewhere, or maybe I'm on the train, and I just want to knock up something, and then I want to enhance that when I get home. Then if I can just send it over seamlessly, or it's already in the cloud and I just fire it up, that's kind of how GarageBand works. And then of course, if you're in that GarageBand Logic paradigm, then it's you just bring it into Logic and away you go. It's very good.
Now weren't they before the talk of ARM processors coming to MacBooks? Weren't they? Forgive me, I think I heard something, but I'm sure one of you guys know that they were talking with the AU3 plugins, that they're eventually working towards that if you or apps even, that if you bought an app on one system, Mac OS or iOS, they would be able to be used even before everything goes ARM.
Yeah, I think that already does happen. I think they've already got audio unit plugins in iOS, and certainly, so you can. I don't know whether they're interchangeable, but there's already,
But I think within Apple's structure that, like right now, if I buy something for Mac OS, I would have to buy the same program again for iOS, where, the iOS, like iPhones and iPads already share stuff. You buy it on one, you bought it on all your devices.
Yeah.
But I thought that's where it was kind of heading to make it just, as far as a purchase, like I don't have to buy whatever Synth Master on iOS because I already own it for the Mac OS. That'd be that kind of thing.
I'm sure that's it must happen. I think if everything else, if the whole ecosystem is merging, then it would make sense. The thing is that it's that whole thing with buying something on one device and having it available on all. Some people go for it, some people don't. I like it, because especially because I've got a family account, it means that anything that I buy on my Mac, my son gets to use on his Mac. Anything I buy on my iPhone, and vice versa, anything that he buys, I get to use. It's all just, it's great. I think it's a really great way of doing it.
Yeah, and even like shared notes and shared calendars become something that I've used increasingly. Like my parents, I go to their house and basically I don't visit with them. I just fix all their stuff. So usually it's my mom digging around in some drawer looking for a piece of paper about everything that's wrong with her computer. So I set it up with, and they, I've got them on Apple stuff also. So now we have a shared note. I say, put it on the shared note on your phone or on your computer. I will be able to see and prepare for what I need to do. And you won't have to go digging for some note. And same thing, families and grocery lists and.
It's very useful stuff. Very useful. Right, so there you go. That's Syntronik iOS, new all-access pass with a free trial from IK Multimedia, available in the App Store now. Right, let's. We've got about 20 minutes or so. Maybe we'll probably run over as we normally do. Let's do our opinion-led piece. So this is something that that Cryss came up with a few weeks ago, and it's let's let Cryss explain. Put him on the spot. What's this about?
Yeah, it's just something that we probably all have experienced and have thought about. But I was reminded of it actually when I was listening to Robbie's interview of David Vorhaus. And of course, one of the first people to really use a Fairlight. And if you haven't gotten subscribed to the Sound on Sound podcast, again, Robbie does the electronic music one. It is fantastic. There's some other people doing it as well. But while I was listening to that interview, it got me thinking again about one of these things where there's a little bit of disconnect between the artist and the audience. And, as musicians, of course, we, for some musicians, let's say, I think we're all in this group that we love gear, we use stuff, and then we kind of move to different things and like, I'm going to try this out, or I'm going to make this my main synthesizer. And we go through these different eras of gear in our sound, and it evolves slowly over time. Of course, these days, it's probably not as big of changes as it was in, say, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s even. And so I got to thinking about how, we identify certain sounds or certain instruments with a certain artist. And so before I get into the question, maybe let's give some examples here. I mean, what instrument would you think of if I say Vangelis?
Well, everybody's going to say CS80, aren't they?
Yeah. It's not, that's it. Jimmy Page. Oh, Les Paul.
Yeah.
The Super Strat and Eddie Van Halen and let's see other synthesis, that they had that very signature sound that you always go to that instrument. And so, of course, with this interview was the Fairlight. And so as Robbie was interviewing him, I was kind of struck at how and it was great because he talked about the early stories about making it was a Stravinsky orchestra hit on the Fairlight and his connections. And but what struck me is that, we've talked about the Fairlight. Obviously, Robbie is a huge Fairlight fan and restores them. And as a conversation was going on, it's like I just got the sense that David didn't realize the significance it had. Now, he knew the former significance of it, and as he was talking through, he's like, actually, it got me a lot of work, but then what ended up happening was that he ended up getting a Prophet VS?
Yeah.
That he got after that? I don't remember. Yeah. That he actually... It was the piece of gear that he used a lot, but people were hiring him because of the Fairlight, even though he had stopped using it after some time. And so this, of course, got me thinking, like, these artists, what happens? What is the disconnect? What is the disconnect with the sound? I mean, why do I think you can understand why artists change, and over time, things moving from analog to digital, but then, years later, decades later, we're going, man, when's so-and-so going to get back to that sound?
Yeah.
Why does this happen? I'm sorry, I forgot to formulate a coherent question out of this, but I thought as a topic.
Yeah, I think it's very valid because, I mean, you mentioned David, he was doing stuff before the Fairlight, and then he got the Fairlight and really, fell into that that world and became very well known for using it and programming it and doing all sorts of wonderful things with it. And then moved on to something different because to him it's not so much about, he doesn't care whether it's a classic instrument or what it can do. Mm-hmm. Here's something else that further expands his palette of sounds, and he just moves on to that. Most people would be quite happy with sticking with one thing. He just moves on to the next thing, and when you look at his studio, there's the first Synthy, the first VCS3 serial number 1 in the corner. There's the first Fairlight that entered the UK in the opposite corner. Then there's a DX7, there's a PPG, there's a Prophet VS. Then there's stuff in there that I would thought, really? You've got all those classics, and then you've got the ASR, that box that Ensoniq did, and then you've got some EMU, Rompler modules and things, and then there's a Korg wave station, and and then of course now he does a lot of stuff on his iPad or on a Windows tablet. But I was thinking, who abandoned their signature stuff, and you think the first people I was thinking of were like bands like Tears for Fears or Eurythmics, who started off very much kind of electronic. You listen to that first Tears for Fears album, there's lots of synths on there. You've listened to the first Eurythmics album, first couple of albums, I guess, were distinctly electronic, and then it's almost like they didn't abandon them, they just pushed them right to the back, and then just brought the guitars and the rock thing forward. And I'd love to have heard more electronic music from Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox or Tears for Fears or whoever. And there are many examples. That Howard Jones moved from purely electronic into when he got to, what was the album? It was his third album. I think it was 1 to 1, where he was being produced by Arif Mardin, and he was now in a big world studio environment with every session player at his beck and call, and it all became very kind of acousticy sounding. It wasn't all synth, and for me that's when I lost interest with Howard Jones. I love those first 2 albums, but everything else he abandoned all of that that kind of made him for me. Depeche Mode, even I've never trust me, I've never gone off Depeche Mode, love them, but they eventually succumbed to bringing the guitar more in, and now live Depeche Mode features guitars and real drums and lots more than just 4 blokes or 3 blokes and some synthesizers.
Do you think that that's like, because I think like with the Eurythmics in particular, they had a very kind of almost avant-garde synth sound at first that was mixed with pop. but to go where they want, where they saw the potential of where they could go, but they couldn't go there without completely changing it. They had to turn into a stadium worthy act, really, because that's where they were going. And going up there with a sequencer, a sequencer and a mono synth, it hasn't got the same
and your ambition
spectacle about it, has it?
The more successful you become, the more ambitious you become, and the more you want to break out. All of a sudden, you know, Depeche Mode start off with or orchestral maneuvers in the dark. There's another band that kind of, for a while, abandoned their synth roots and went more traditional. And so the first couple of albums, maybe 3 albums, they're distinctly electronic, and then all of a sudden you have all of this stuff opening up to you, and you're like, well, I couldn't ever dream of using a real life orchestra, but now, because I've had a couple of hit albums, I can click my fingers and have one in the studio the very next day. Other bands, clearly, like if you look at Depeche Mode, for example, they've always been a synthesizer band. That's it. When it comes to live, it's different, but in the studio, they're synth, and that's and maybe a little bit of guitar. But they've kind of stuck to their roots. But I would be tempted, if I was ever lucky enough to write a hit album and then get a deal and then the world is my oyster, why wouldn't I? And then but then you get other bands like, let's say, for example, U2, who have remained guitar based with their signature sounds. A U2 song every time you hear it, because it's got that guitar in it. Same with New Order. You could tell a New Order track because it had Pete Hook's bass always there. Never abandoned it. It was a winning formula. It was always always there. And so I don't know. Because if you're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. If you carry on doing what you've always been doing, you'll be accused of not being adventurous and just pandering to your base, BASE. Or if you go the other way, you say, "Oh, you've abandoned those that It's like Genesis. They always had keyboards and stuff, but they were distinctly classic prog, and then Gabriel leaves, and they then become kind of pop prog. And there's a distinct difference in the sound, and most. I mean, I like both, but most people are either one or the other. They're never the twain shall meet. So, it's an odd one.
It's something that it's very strange, because I think like Cryss mentioned before, you get a new synth and secretly in the back of your mind somewhere, it's like, is this the one that's going to define me, my style, help define that style? And I'm like that with everything I buy. It's like the Pro One. It's like, right, I'm gonna start using the Pro One and everything, and really get to grips with it and that. But that's what we all want. I think the ultimate accolade for a musician who's not a vocalist, it is to be identifiable by what they play. So you hear something and you go, "Oh yeah, that's Cryss Synthient," or that's Robbie Puricelli. It's what we. It's what I want. I want people to be able to tell that it's me without me talking on it or singing on it. I think Billy Curry's got that.
Yeah,
I think, you can spot Billy Curry a mile away.
But is it wise to say I want people to recognise me just because of the sounds that I make? Take Björk, for example. Every single Björk album is different from every other Björk album. Not one is the same. Yeah. But absolutely that it's Björk. You're under no illusion as to who this is, even though it doesn't sound anything like anything she's ever done before or anything she'll ever do again. It's her, and she doesn't need to. I mean, my favourite album of hers is Homogenic, which is lots of samples and stuff. And then a few albums later, she's doing this. What's the Biophilia, which it was a really weird thing, but it was distinctly Björk, and then she used lots of vocals and stuff. And so why should an artist kind of pigeonhole themselves with a sound? Why, should the differentiator not be the instruments, but the styles that they employ?
I mean, think about Bjork. It's about her songwriting versus, say, somebody like David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, where part of their sound has changed, obviously, when Waters left, or Syd Barrett. Their sound has evolved, but when you hear a track and you hear a Strat neck pickup that's and it's clean and it's got the delay and the reverb and the compression, and he bends that note like he does, you're just like, there's Gilmour.
Yeah. Despite
all the songwriting changing and everything else, like, it just, bam, there it is. I mean, we don't expect, like, Bjork being so, like, diverse. We don't expect, what is her instrumental sound? I have no idea. I don't know.
No.
But I could tell you exactly what David Gilmour sounds like. And I'm not saying one's better than the other,
no.
because they're both really important. It's, I wonder, and, hit you with you guys with this, like, so one thing that I have been observing in two worlds, so with the guitar world and the synth world, and living in both of them and seeing how they're both operating, as I've come into the synth world, I feel like I'm reliving the guitar world of like 15 or 20 years ago, which was great. It was this explosion of, as music went to crap 20 years ago, in my opinion. But or at least I should say rock music went to crap. But the one thing that I noticed is, as far as musicians and gear, like we had all this buildup of technology. Everybody was getting rid of their vintage Strats and Les Pauls, and they're getting pointy guitars and refrigerator-sized racks of gear, and it was digital. And all of a sudden it got real thin, and everybody sounded like Steve Lukather. And but then sometime in the mid 90s, late 90s, it started coming back. And then there was a lot of guitarists that decided, like, you know what? My classic guitar tone sounded better than this. So I'm going back all analog. I'm going to get my old amps out. And these guys are pulling out their old Marshalls or Fenders or whatever they were using. And I'm kind of wondering if that will also happen in the synth world, because we're kind of following along a little bit delayed from that. And now that we're having this analog Renaissance. Damn, I watched too much. Yes, I watched too much British TV now, and I can't confuse, like, Renaissance or Renaissance. Renaissance.
We should really be asking the French.
I'm learning French. It's Renaissance.
Yeah. Are we going to be able to? Are we going to see this in some? Will Vangelis bring out the CS80? Will are one of our most famous synthesists, Eddie Van Halen, pull out the old Oberheims?
Have you heard the new Yellow single, Wubba Dubba,
Yes.
or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Now, so, all right, it's distinctly yellow, and it could have been released as the second single after. Oh yeah, because and I watched that and I thought, yeah, this is enjoyable, but fuck me, guys, do something different. But then I'm equally guilty of listening to something by someone and saying, what the hell are you trying to do? Stick with with what you know best. Another example, again from the 80s, Scritti Politti. Okay, so Scritti Politti went from being a squat-based communist punk band who I mean, if you listen to their early stuff, it's very difficult to like, because it's just so bizarre. And then he starts getting into kind of blue-eyed soul stuff, and then has by the third album is full on R&B, and changed the pop landscape and inspired huge amounts of people with that pristine, polished, perfect digital pop for 2 albums, and then disappears for over a decade, comes back with a semi hip hop album, and then disappears for another decade or so, and then comes back with a virtually acoustic album, and yet it's all distinctly Scritti Politti. You could the chord progressions, the harmonies, it's all distinctly Green Gartside, but it's just completely different style. And I just can't help being a fan. I can't help just loving it all. And he could play a couple of upturned roasting dishes, and it would sound good, I'm sure. But sometimes it's they're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Do we change because we have the ability to do that, and maybe alienate some of our base? Or
there's and there's two issues that are connected with this, because you've spoken a lot to the style of music, which is not is not disconnected from the texture and tone of the instruments that you're playing, because obviously these instruments have inspired styles of music. When the digital synthesizers hit, when the DX7 hit, it changed the landscape of what things sound like, or the D50 or whatever. Same thing with the Marshall amplifier. There's just different things you did with it, but it's always, I guess and I've kind of liked that there can be some bands that evolve and change over time. Again, a huge Beatles and Pink Floyd fan, and their sounds all changed throughout the course of their career, even something short as the Beatles' career.
Yeah.
But to think of something like Pink Floyd, where they're kind of some of their tones, there was some element of it that Momentary Lapse of Reason sounded terrible, and that was an awful sounding album in the late 80s. I like some of the songs off of it, but it does not sound like Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall. It just does not have the quality production, and it sounds very dated because of it. But it's interesting to see who would come back and in a new way, so maybe having style and this tone and texture thing, to see how, as styles have changed and musicians have grown, they're making different music, but to bring in some of the classic sounds that people identify with them, is always interesting.
So here's a curveball. Who would you wish that they absolutely would change their signature style or their signature instrument? Because my God, we've heard enough of it. I'll throw my hat in the ring. Nile Rodgers. Love everything that Nile's done, but my God, I just lately, I'm just so fed up of hearing the in everything that he's ever done, everything that he ever touches, or he
he's so good
on.
at it, though, isn't he?
He's great at it. He's brilliant at it. He's the master at it. He's made an entire career out of it. But it would be so nice for him to, he talks about his jazz roots, and playing in jazz bars in Harlem. Do some of that. Do something, show us. Don't just keep trading off the same thing over and over again, because, when somebody releases a single featuring Nile Rodgers, that, about halfway through the song, you're going to get this break where it's, and it just sounds like everything else that he's ever done, and it's good, but it's just, you can have too much of a good thing. What are your... Do you have any people like that you wish they would just stop and change?
I'm gonna create so many enemies, I think, by saying this, but I actually, even though he's a big hero of mine, Vince Clarke, I think he's got all that gear, and he's obviously a genius, but he keeps doing exactly the same things. It's erasure, and that's it, and it you know exactly what it's going to do before you know what I mean.
Yeah. Did you ever hear the VCMG stuff that he did with Martin Gore a few years back?
I did have a listen to a little bit of
that.
That
typical.
was all right.
Yeah, that was good.
That was all right. Yeah.
And he does a lot of that three-dimensional soundscape stuff with Martin Ware, doesn't he, as well? So I just wonder whether, like Robert De Niro does, he just churns out stuff that he knows he can do and just, get it out straight away. Yeah. It'll make some money. and then he can then put that in the bank and go off and do the things he really wants to do, the low budget stuff that's not going to make a huge ton of cash.
He's like a synth god, isn't he?
Yeah.
You know? So I don't mean that anyway disrespectful to him, but I would like him to maybe work with another vocalist and do something quite adventurous.
Yeah.
You know, instead of mainstream.
He should never kicked Alison Moy out of the band.
No.
I don't know. So, an artist I'll bring up, I haven't heard anything new from him. I'm sure he's got stuff out, but I just am not aware of it. Would be Jan Hammer. I came to know him stuff through Jeff Beck. And so when he played with Jeff Beck in the 70s, they did their thing. Really cool, and hearing the mini Moog all over that. And then when I really got into synthesizers, I had bought the first 7 days, and there's a track called Darkness and Earth in Search of the Sun, and Earth in Search of the Sun it's just a really cool sound. It's got this, it's all this classic fat Moog sound, and he's doing his classic lead stuff, and it seems like that era, which was very similar to his stuff with Jeff Beck, except their stuff was more prog. But his sound was great. I just like the tone, like some of the things he was coming up with. And it almost seemed like that era was too short, because I listened to his albums, and I just kind of threw on iTunes, like previewed everything, trying to find out, okay, that's the sound I really like. That's one of the sounds I really like. Where else can I find it? What other albums have he done that's like this? And there was like not really anything at all. And then by the 80s, it's getting into, the more digital sound that he had, which obviously, like the Miami Vice stuff and everything else he did, it was hugely successful, but it wasn't what I was looking for. But some of the 70s artists that are still around, I haven't really seen. So again, I'm not too familiar. I know this is heresy, but Jean-Michel Jarre, I have some stuff of his from, I think, the 70s, like the Oxygen stuff. I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. I want to see what this became afterwards, like what it evolved to. And then when I found out what it evolved to, or stuff he's doing recently, I'm just not that turned on by it. I'm not hearing some of the cool tones and textures that were available in the early days. Yeah. But just outside of synthesizers, the artist that kind of disappointed me. So Eric Clapton during John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, that's the classic Beano album. Just a great sound, guitar tone. His style was developing. He didn't sound as thin as the Yardbirds before when he was with them, and he kind of developed. And then, to me, the pinnacle of his entire career was Cream, and his guitar tones inspired so many people, like mainly the live ones. The studio ones weren't so great, but that fat, when he's doing the Goodbye concert, and he's got the Gibsons and the Marshall, and I love Fender stuff, and that's probably, the stuff that I use the most, but his sound, to me, was the Gibson and Marshall. And even when they did the Cream reunion tour, or the concert, before the two of them passed, he did one night of practice with that classic gear, and then he's like, I just don't really like this stuff anymore. So he went back to his Strat, which didn't sound right for Cream to me, and it wasn't the sound that he had popularized with it. So it was a little bit of a disappointment for me.
Yeah, you mentioned Jean-Michel Jarre. I grew up and he was one of my first kind of electronic music heroes. And then you listen to albums like Zuluk, which obviously was vastly different because it was mostly Fairlight and didn't sound like anything he'd done before, which was all very analog. And I think after that, he did some other stuff, and I think maybe he just got to the point where he think, actually, I'd probably sell more records if I just do it this way, and kind of slip back into, and then he's fallen foul of this thing where he's gone all kind of working with top pop producers on various things, and it's just like, really, you don't need to. You're Jean-Michel Jarre. You don't need to stay relevant. It's like the Pet Shop Boys when they worked with Xenomania. who are like this big, I forget how many people there are in this team. There's like, probably 20 people, different, all right, I'll write a chord for this thing and then I'll write a chord for that, and they stitch it all together. I was like, come on, you've written some of the best synth pop albums of all time. You don't need to stay relevant by working with these other people. And then, eventually they've kind of come back to, they've finished. They did 3 albums with Stuart Price, who is, a well-known, kind of trendy pop producer, and I'm glad that they're over. Not that they're awful albums, but I just, they're clearly trying to stay relevant. And I just, I actually was flicking through a magazine and found I was quoted in issue 1 of Classic Pop magazine when they reviewed Elysium, the Pet Shop Boys album, because I commented in some blog post or something that, I wanted Imperial Pet Shop Boys, from the first 6 albums, and not this wishy-washy stuff, which probably did my chances of meeting Neil and Cryss and working with them no good whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, it's I guess, artistically you're torn. Do you the record label? If I mean, how many bands or artists have said, many years after the event, I wanted to do this, but the label wouldn't let me do it. Prince was like that. It was half the reason, a lot of the reason why he fell out with Warner Brothers is he wanted to do all this stuff, and Warner's didn't want to. Once he got free of Warner's, he did that jazz album. He did, News it was called. He did, the concept albums where every song begins with the song title begins with the letter X or something. He got that out of his system, but there are a lot of artists that you would never get the opportunity to do that because they're not Prince. So,
yeah, I think about like Vangelis and obviously our appreciation for him and the kind of music he was making with those old analog synthesizers and what it brought out of him because he was using those particular instruments. And then after I'd first got into him and was checking out his stuff, there was, I don't know how long ago, probably within the last 10 years, there's a video that's around on YouTube, you can find it, where it's him playing, and his setup is a more modern setup. He's got, I'm sure everybody's seen the video, where he's got all these little boxes all set up, and he's got all the pedals below, and then the actual keys. And he's doing orchestral stuff, and with the pedals, as I recall, he's like mixing in and changing all that kind of stuff. And as you're looking at it, you're like, well, as far as the sound, the texture of it goes, anybody can do just as well or better if they grab, some Spitfire stuff or, Contact or whatever. That's not really that big. And I think, whatever music he was making that maybe it was great. I don't even remember the piece. I don't remember what it sounded like at all. And I've seen that video a number of times. Mm. But the things that he did where the tone and texture was combined with the brilliant songwriting, and they played off of one another, like one affects the other, and how you can play and respond to an instrument, obviously with his career, affected what kind of music he wrote. That I wonder if anybody like that will ever kind of come to an awareness, whether it's people, hey, are you going to come back to that, or not saying that he has to make Blade Runner again or whatever album. I'm not saying that, because again, that's the style. The style can change, but what about some new music that would be created on the instruments that made you famous?
Yeah, it's I guess it's all down to do people want to do that? Do the labels obviously there's a business to be run, and if you want to do your crazy jazz fusion based album and you're known for the exact opposite, the label's not going to support that because they're not going to sell many. So then you go off and do a side project, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Damon Albarn's a great example. Somebody mentioned him in the chat. He's the leader of a Britpop band, and then he's the leader of Gorillaz that does something completely different, and he's done The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, and all these different things, and he's able to do that. But not every artist has that ability afforded to them. You know, some people are just slaves to the machine. But yes,
also interesting. I mean, to think like when it, you know, the focus on the instrument. So you know, there's a number of people that use like a CS80 and to great effect. You know, but his name is attached to it for certain in his style, and so when people play those instruments, they tend to evoke, you know, his influence. And you know, like last week on Jamie's show, Flying Lotus, you know, he was buying up. I think he had bought like a 50, 60, and 80 or something, a CS, and you know, he was waiting for the CS80 to come, and the music that he had done on the 50 or the 60, I think, was very Vangelis-esque. It was beautiful. It sounded amazing, and you know, with the prospect of some of those sounds coming back, either by Yamaha or Behringer, you know, it's kind of like there's a lot of people that want it, that are and a lot of people that are looking to do it, like Flylo. It'll be interesting if some of the original artists pick up on that and go, oh, these people actually are really going back and liking that era of my work. Maybe I'll do something again. But
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, it's an interesting topic. Ben, got any last words?
No. It is interesting, though. It's I mean, I'm starting to now think that, like, if I do actually create this distinctive sound of my own, I'm going to have to spin it off one day as well.
Well, let's say you got to, if you make a fortune and then you have all the opportunities afforded to you, you can then bin it off and do something else and not worry too much about it, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, interesting. And that's a conversation I suppose we could go on and on about and find loads of examples to support lots of the different arguments, but some interesting points in the chat room as well. Won't go through them all because we'll be here all night, but thanks for all of that input. So there we go. That's another show in the bag. Episode 15 will soon be hitting 20 in a few weeks' time, so that'll be interesting. It's good that we're able to keep this going. So let's do our quick round the room. Ben, what have you got lined up for this week? Anything musical?
Yeah. I've got a bit of I say musical. It's musical related. Got a bit of Jasper's stand modification going on.
Lovely.
I'm going to sew it down and spray it white, and have it in this section of the room. I'm going to do that this week.
Have you? Because now that the government here in the UK have sanctioned open air gigs. Are you looking at anything like that to get Electro 80s back out?
I hope so. I mean, I've not really heard that much from the others at the minute. They've all. I don't know if they're still with us. I don't know. They've disappeared. But as soon as things start moving, we're up for like some outdoor gigs. That'd be a great.
Yeah. It's a start.
Way back into
it's a start.
Yeah.
I hear Gary Newman's doing driving gigs. He's coming over and not
don't fancy that.
No. Yeah. Can't see that one.
I don't fancy watching or playing them. You know.
It's an odd thing. But hey, you know, if it works, it works. Cryss, how about you? Anything lined up for this week?
Well, I finished up this Prophet 6 sound set for the second time.
Yay!
After losing some to software. So, unfortunately, that means a lot of videoing to be done. And as much as I love doing sound stuff, I loathe doing video. So, I'm trying to psych myself up to get it done. So yeah, but it's good. I'm glad to be wrapping that up, and I still have to do some videoing for Micro Freak, and then once that gets done, I'm just going to be so relieved and get it. I mean, I think some of that stuff's already loaded up on the website. You can't access it or buy it yet, but I'm going to be so relieved. I think I'm going to just take a week or two and not do anything and just work on fun stuff or something because man, I'm worn out. So, but yeah, that's basically it. Just been fun to have another week with you guys and everybody joining us. So
yeah,
thanks for that.
Fun. All good fun. Well, I've got what have I got? More Z1. I want to really dig into that, and I really want to get into the CS6. Oh, I really shouldn't. 6X, CS6X. I need to invest some time in those so I can justify the money I spent on them. But I think I need to do some Jaspers for over there. I need to think about that. So maybe in the coming weeks, buy some of that. And new podcast, new Sound on Sound podcast on Tuesday. So,
yes.
If you haven't already, go and subscribe to the podcasts either on Apple, Deezer, Spotify, Google, all the major podcast networks. We're across all of those, and they've actually started putting them on YouTube. Mine's not on there yet. Caro's with her interview with Suzanne Charney is now on YouTube as well. So it's obviously it's just static images, but they've done that really nicely. So if YouTube is your thing, you can listen there as well. So yeah, new one on Tuesday. Can't say who it is, but it was a lot of fun. And the guy is absolutely I'm half giving it away there. He's a bundle of fun. Really enjoyed it. So I hope you do too. So yeah, got that coming out on Tuesday. So keep an ear out for that one. Other than that, it's a regular day job for 2 more weeks, and then I've got a fortnight off. So,
nice.
Yeah, which I was supposed to be going to Italy, but that's had to be postponed till next year at the earliest, I guess. So I should be happy that I'm not having to get up and do a day's work, but I'll be miserable because I'm not going to be in the Alps with my family. So
there's a significant birthday on the horizon for you then.
There is, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Begins with a 5. Yeah, I wish.
Oh.
I wish. Yeah, it begins with a 5 and ends in a... Oh, my God. That hurts. Yeah, do you know, I've noticed... I'm just noticing more and more that more things ache, more things hurt, and things take longer to mend. Do you know when it's like I pulled a muscle, right? You know when you're in the shower and you're doing your back, and I just must have overstretched, and I pulled this muscle just under my rib cage, and my God, it was like I was being stabbed. And normally that's gone. You take a couple of painkillers, you wake up in the morning, and it's gone. It was there for almost a week. Jeez, it's just it really was, and it's just not getting any easier. So there you go. I'm beyond celebrating birthdays now. It's just whatever, and because I can't really do much this year, that was if I could have done something special. But I think we're having some friends and family for a socially distanced barbecue or something. But that's about it. Anyway, see you guys same time, same place next week. Thanks ever so much for your participation. Thanks to everyone in the chat room. I'm not going to go through and name you all. You know who you are. Thanks for joining us. Hit the like button, please. Subscribe to us. Share us with your friends and your family. Tell them where we are, where we can find us. And just as a quick final note, I noticed we had a comment on the group the other day. I'm just going to try and find it because I think it's really important.
From Phil?
Yeah, that we mention this because it's exactly why Ben started this group, and my Facebook is being... Basically, it was a post... what's his name? Phil
Aiken?
That's it, yeah. So he said, this is like the nicest, most egoless, friendliest, helpful synthesizer group on Facebook. Or words to that effect. I'm paraphrasing here.
And that's from somebody who has himself given so much. Like he was one of the early Moog 1 guys, and that's how I got to know him. And he was working stuff out and figuring out routing stuff that they didn't put in the manual and sharing it with everybody. And he's always on forums like helping people with tech support. So I was very happy that he came and joined us, and then also that he would say such a nice thing. It was very appreciated.
Yeah, it's unfortunately my Facebook page is being a bit slow. I think it's probably because my computer's under a lot of strain. But yes, it was very nice to see. Oh, hang on. No, it's gone again. But very, very nice and very, very rewarding. And I think Ben probably took quite a lot of pleasure from that one.
Yeah, it was lovely to see that. Yeah.
And that's exactly what it's all about. We're not egos. We're just like-minded individuals sharing a passion and an interest. There you go. Excellent. Thanks ever so much for your participation. Hope you enjoyed it. For those that are watching on replay, why weren't you here for the live show? Don't forget, 8 o'clock UK, 3 p.m. on the East Coast, 12 p.m. on the West Coast, every week, every Sunday. And, of course, join us on the Facebook page. But until then, take care, have fun, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.